Welcome to the playground of potential. I'm Matt the Poet, and this is my playground. Today, I'd like to talk about hormesis. So, we've all heard the phrase, that which doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. And that phrase is summed up in this idea of hormesis, which is you add a little bit of stress to a system, a biological system primarily, and that system reacts and becomes stronger. So an easy illustration of this, exercise. So we all know that if we lift weights, we're doing tiny rips in the muscles. There's tiny tears in each muscle. And what happens is the body reacts, it regrows those muscles, and they grow back stronger, and we become more fit, more buff. So I'm going to go over a number of ways that hormesis has impacted my life. And the first of which, I hadn't even heard of hormesis at the time. But what happened was I moved to Taos, New Mexico. So Taos is at altitude. So it's, I think, close to 7,000 feet in altitude. So it's got a lot less air up here. After a couple weeks of being here, you acclimatize, and what ends up happening is your body adjusts to the stress of not having as much oxygen. So what it does is it creates more red blood cells to carry the oxygen. And eventually you sort of equalize, and living up here at altitude feels the same as it did when I lived at sea level. Except one thing changed dramatically, and that was when I went back to sea level. So I'm going to tell you a story. It's a pretty ridiculous story of my first return to sea level after coming to Taos. So I get invited to come back home for Thanksgiving in 2018. And, I'm meeting up with my family, and my sisters asked me a few days before I leave on my trip whether I'd like to participate in a 5K run on Thanksgiving morning. I'm at that time in my life, I'm starting to get into challenging myself physically, and I say yes, even though I hate running. I literally hate running. I've loathed it for most of my life. Currently, I'd say I don't hate it anymore. I actually enjoy it a little bit sometimes. But certainly in 2018, 4 years ago, I was still pretty much in that loathing position, but wanting to challenge myself, wanting to step out of my comfort zone. So I go back home, and it's the night before the 5K. And mind you, the last 5K I did was like a couple years earlier, and I literally threw up afterwards. It was pretty awful. So that should show you how much I disliked running and, kind of the shape that I was in at the time. Now I had begun to do some training here at altitude, but no running for the most part. So the night before the race, I ended up meeting with my friends from high school, and we start to drink. Now, another aspect of that increased red blood cells, is that you actually get drunk much quicker. So, lo and behold, I get a phone call waking me up out of a hungover stupor by my sister the next morning. And I've blacked out. I don't know how much sleep I've actually gotten. I feel awful. And she says, it's time for the race. Get back home. So I drive home, and I meet up with them. They're completely disappointed. They're like, you're crazy. What are you doing? Now, mind you, I've been gloating the whole time, telling my sister that I'm going to beat her in this race. Now, she runs regularly, and I loathe running. This was absolutely an insane thing to say at the time. Like, no one would have bet on me. She was a regular runner, ran, multiple times a week. And I had ran a 5K 2 years earlier and threw up afterwards. So, like, no one would bet on me. And then you add the fact that I'm now drunk, or excuse me, hungover. And it's a recipe for a ridiculous story. So we go in the race, and I just, I'm confident. For whatever reason, I've gained this confidence. And I began running the race, and lo and behold, like, I don't find myself getting winded at all. Like, I'm running straight out, and I find myself very quickly taking an early lead in this race. Not that I was necessarily racing my sister, but I was definitely competing a little bit. So 2/3 in, I mean, it's 5K and I've not run, so it's a difficult task regardless. And I'm hungover and not feeling well, so it's just like, rah! And yet, a few minutes into the race, I'm actually starting to get a pace to it, and I'm realizing that I'm not getting winded like I think I should. And what I come to realize is all that amplified red blood cells have now made me into a superhuman. I am now able to carry so much more oxygen in my blood, so I'm not getting winded by this exercise. Now, about 3/4 of the way through the race, my sister actually starts to pass me, but I just keep up the pace right behind her. I'm not trying to tax myself too much, but I'm just keeping pace behind her. And about 100 yards before the finish line, I go all out. Now, I never would have known this beforehand, but I had so much in the tank. So I'm just like sprinting for the last 100 yards. And I zoom past her right before the finish line, and she's pissed off. I can't tell you how mad she is. Now, this is just a fun story. It turns out, like, when we actually did the readings, that we actually tied. So I went past her right as we were passing the line. But it was a remarkable event. Regardless, no one would have guessed that outcome for sure. But it is a clear illustration of how much stronger I became by sort of passive hormesis of living at altitude. Okay? So hormesis has been an incredible addition to my life. Another way in which hormesis has drastically impacted my life is through cold water submersion. Now, I've talked about it in other videos. I can link those in the description. But I've, over the last few years, gotten very deeply into the Wim Hof Method, which, Wim has created breath work and this sort of regimen, to brave the cold. And I can't tell you how much this has improved my health in so many different ways. The stress that the cold puts on your body is temporary, but the strength and the improvements in vascular health, my immune system, like, those things last. And, I'll make a trip into the cold water, try and make it in there at least once a week. The other options are cold showers. These are wonderful ways that we can begin to utilize the hormesis that we experience through the stress of the cold. Um, so I highly recommend looking up one of my videos down below in the description or checking out Wim's website on his method, because this changed my relationship with the cold. Nowadays, I can, I can live in a house without regular heating in it because I've changed that relationship. I have my wood fire stove, and I can, use that when I choose to. But I also am capable of withstanding the cold in tremendous ways. I've built up cold shock proteins, brown fat, these things that have uh, really changed my relationship, my ability to withstand this stressor. And it's all thanks to hormesis, this little bit of stress that creates a lot of strength. That which does not kill you makes you stronger. Um, so there's one last thing that I would like to talk about in regards to hormesis, and that is uh, we've become very comfortable as a society. We live in air-conditioned spaces for the most part. Generally, there's heating in the winter. Like we wear clothing, we can bundle up, and we've made our social interactions far more comfortable. So there's this trend that we've seen over the last decade of people um, requesting safe spaces. So spaces where they won't be emotionally triggered in any way. Now, I fully respect an individual's need to self-protect, Um, the question I raise is these microaggressions or these different emotional triggers, are they do they have some sort of benefit in the end when it comes to creating emotional resilience? In much the same way that I can withstand the cold, I've never been shy of, um, well, I've experienced, just being a sensitive individual for most of my life. I've experienced a lot of emotional conflict or adversity at times in my life. And what I've found is that has made me stronger, and my curiosity becomes, are we denying ourselves a sort of hormesis within the emotional spectrum that is causing greater fragility in our emotional resilience and strength? And it's just a question. It's like I said before, I do understand the um, the reasoning behind safe spaces and trigger warnings and these sorts of things. Um, but I am curious whether they are causing an overall societal fragility in the realm of emotional well-being. Because if you deny yourself growing stronger, you're actually doing more damage in the end. It feels that way. Um, and I'm open to discussion on that. Of course, if you feel strongly in the opposite, I'd love to hear comment on that in the comments below. But that's my episode. That's my love story to hormesis. I love hormesis. It's growing comfortable with being uncomfortable. And what you find is that strength and that ability to grow comfortable with uncomfortability, uh, it allows you to be completely free, because now you can withstand, um, you can engage with things that are very difficult, and they no longer feel that difficult. You know, we become stronger. We're able to push through resistance, all these different things. And then suddenly our capacity expands and our ability to achieve becomes stronger. So I highly recommend you play with hormesis in your life. See where you can stress yourself a little bit to get a big gain. Okay? So if you happen to like the video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Please share this video with others as well. I feel like we can all benefit from this idea of hormesis. And I say I feel that. I know that actually. I know that from experience and seeing this across multiple variables in clients, in friends, that hormesis and putting ourselves through those difficult challenges actually make us far more happy and far more fulfilled in our lives. So I welcome you to really play with that, and let me know what you think in the comments below. Sending you all lots of love, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Peace.